Hello, welcome back. October has passed, but we will stay in the spooky state of mind for one more video. Today I will be talking about an SCP, a subject some of you may be familiar with, but many of you will not. Let's take it easy. Let's start off with something everybody knows. Let's talk about Frankenstein. The novel was a trailblazer. It's arguably the first romantic novel and the first modern science fiction novel. Side note, I am in love with the idea that the first, and possibly the best, piece of science fiction, a deleteriously male-dominated genre, was written by an 18-year-old girl. But the previously established tradition it pulls from most is gothic horror. Frankenstein is meant to terrify you, not with ghosts or zombies or even monsters, but with an all-encompassing existential dread. The nameless monster at the heart of the story is scary in a very particular way. Sure, he's ugly, decayed, a bastardization of the human form. He's vengeful, evil perhaps, sacrificing innocent people like pawns in a chess match. But that's not why he's horrifying. He is a reflection of the anguish we are all born with and must carry every day. The monster, like us, was gifted life against his will. He was imbued with the need to connect with people, to love and be beloved. But he was also given fear, self-doubt, and he was born into a world that could not understand him. When he tried to understand himself, to self-actualize, it only made him feel more alone. He began to see his existence as a curse, both to himself and to others. What happens to you when you think your existence is making everyone's life worse? This is what I think takes a story from spooky campfire tale to a timeless classic. I'd like to introduce you to another story, one I'm not sure many of you have read. SCP-2316, Field Trip. Although some of you may know it by its most famous line, "You do not recognize the bodies in the water." Before we get into the story, I think I should give you some more context on what the SCP Foundation is, and define some terms that are going to be brought up in the article. The SCP Foundation is a collaborative fiction project. Its website consists of articles that detail different anomalies that the Foundation is focused on containing. This is a fascinating and rich world that I don't have time to get into right now. So if you're interested, I would recommend the Volgan's video, SCP Explained, and Frederick Knudsen's video on the subject. Think of the Foundation as a secret government agency in charge of protecting the world's veil of normality from all manner of oddities. Sort of like Men in Black. Every anomaly discovered by the Foundation is given a designation, which would be SCP and then a number, and then an article would be written for that specific subject. So, when people refer to an SCP, that means one particular anomaly. But when they say SCP Foundation, or simply the Foundation, they are talking about the organization. SCP, by the way, stands for Secure, Contain, Protect, which is the motto of the agency. Each article has a strict format it must adhere to. The Foundation is nothing if not regimented and bureaucratic. Articles require containment procedures, instructions on how to sequester the anomalous entities from the public, containment class, a designation that lets Foundation staff know how difficult it is to contain said entity, and a description, an explanation of what the SCP is and why it is so incongruous with our understanding of reality. Most articles also feature logs, usually in the form of interviews or explorations of anomalous locations, and this is where most of the narrative heavy lifting comes in. Some articles also feature footnotes, addendums, notes from higher-ranking members of the Foundation. These additions are made at the discretion of the author. We will get into the devices used in SCP-2316 when we actually analyze the text. There were also a few important terms that I should define. If you already know these, then I'll ask for your patience, because I want everyone to be able to understand the depth of this story. First off are the phrases expunged and redacted. Seeing these in an article means that sensitive information has been removed. In real life, censoring is usually a cheeky way to make the article seem more mysterious. In the lore of the SCP Foundation, you are usually presumed to be a low-level Foundation employee reading articles off of some site terminal. The Foundation, like most secret organizations, has a detailed hierarchy of access. Information can be censored either because you don't have sufficient clearance, or because knowledge of that information is somehow detrimental to the anomaly's containment, or detrimental to you personally. This brings us to our other important term, cognitohazard. A cognitohazard is sort of like a virus. It's an idea that infects you when you perceive it, and this can be through any of your senses: sight, smell, touch, whatever. Once you know about a cognitohazard, it has already gotten you. Like I mentioned before, the Foundation takes measures to exclude cognitohazardous information from its articles, hence things like locations and dates being blacked out. Congratulations, you've now been initiated. Let's access the database and get into 2316. The first thing we see is a message from the Overseer Council and the Containment class, which is Keter, meaning the anomaly is exceedingly difficult to contain. The Overseer Council is the very top of the Foundation. If they are leaving a note that unauthorized access is strictly forbidden, then this is serious business. We then have a formal warning that this article contains a cognitohazard, as well as a cognitive resistance value test. This test is hardly important to the story, but does a good job of establishing early that you play an integral part of this experience. We also get the first couple instances of the most important sentence in this article. You do not recognize the bodies in the water. The containment procedure is bleak as well. SCP-2316 is located inside a lake, and the Foundation has surrounded it with a fence that is at least 50 meters away from the shore, or about 164 feet. Surveillance footage of the lake can only be reviewed by vetted personnel. The team patrolling the fence line cannot have knowledge of SCP-2316's characteristics, and any person who comes within 50 meters of the lake is considered lost. It's clear early how dangerous even knowing about this anomaly is. Are you sure you want to keep reading? Description: SCP-2316 is the designation for an anomalous phenomenon existing within County. SCP-2316 manifests as a group of human corpses floating in a small group at the surface of the water. It is theorized by the Foundation that the bodies seen in the lake are not separate, but actually manifestations of a collective consciousness. The cognitohazardous effect is, when someone observes or has knowledge of the SCP, they believe that the bodies in the water are people that they recognize, typically friends from childhood. Once someone has fallen under the SCP's effects, they accordingly attempt to enter the lake and make contact. After this point, no individual has ever been recovered, and they are considered lost. There are a few breaks in the formality you wouldn't expect from a Foundation-approved article. The familiar phrase, "you do not recognize the bodies in the water," shows up a few times, bookending particularly poignant pieces of information. It doesn't add anything to our understanding of the SCP. It seems like a measure to thwart subconscious influencing, but they might want to try something else. If we take a look at the footnotes, we see some thing is reaching out to us. I know who they are. I know their names, each and every one of them. Don't you? What do you think this is? Some rogue agent trying to let you in on something? A manifestation of the SCP infecting you through the article? Or a test by the Foundation, trying to weed out people not resilient enough to handle the knowledge? These footnotes directly contradict information in the article, listing names after the Foundation claims that the bodies are unrecognizable, saying they're lying, they know damn well who they are, and asking you, the reader, how can you not recognize the bodies in the water? This seems like the end of the article. There is an interview log, expunged, probably because it is hazardous, and another cognitive resistance value test, which you fail. Better luck next time. But there is a hint in the last footnote. They don't want to show you, but I will. Below. 2 lines under the footnote is hidden text. Clicking on it overrides the redaction and reveals a log between a Foundation doctor and someone affected by SCP-2316. This log makes 2 important revelations. 1, this subject went into the lake, interacted with the bodies, and was not lost, at least in a physical sense. And 2, the subject mentions Birchwood High School. A school was also brought up earlier in the article, and there are some hyperlinks throughout that lead to various tales, which are more traditional short stories hosted on the site. The SCP Foundation does not have a canon, meaning there is not one set of events or characters or settings that are considered correct for the purposes of creating a cohesive SCP universe. Instead, there are many different canons consisting of several SCP articles and tales that share similar themes. SCP-2316 belongs to the Class of 76 canon, which is one of my favorites. If you are interested, following the linked articles in 2316 will give you some answers as to what exactly is going on. But, for brevity, I will be sticking to just this one article. There is one more hidden link to explore. Under the failed CRV box is an invalid addendum. Clicking the hidden link 2 lines under that reveals a frantic message from our intruder. They reference the Class of 76, claim the Foundation is somehow responsible for either the deaths of our classmates, the anomaly, or both, and continues to compel you to save your friends and go to the lake. This is the end of this article. Like I said, you can follow some links to uncover more of the story, but I'm more interested in the lake and our friends' bodies bobbing at the surface. There's a lot of fog and red tape here. It's purposefully vague, but being vague isn't clever or effective in its own right, as I've been told many times after letting people know I thought Prometheus was really good. Let's circle back to Frankenstein. Let's get back to why this is a great horror story. 2316 has some textbook horror imagery. Creepy location, supernatural force with bad intentions, low chances of survival. But again, that isn't going to cut it. I could tell you that in 1993, there was a mass grave discovered off the 15 freeway, just past Barstow. No sign of death could be confirmed for the 6 bodies initially, but the autopsy revealed that each victim's pelvic bone had been extracted and replaced with copper tubes and wiring. That might unsettle you, but that's all it will do. 2316 uses the uncertainty and mistrust created in its style to infect you with an idea. Time will never stop. The past gets farther away from you every moment, and it will eventually dissolve into the horizon, leaving no trace that it ever existed. The bodies in the lake aren't really people. Sure, the intruder says he knows their names, but that's not why we care about them. The bodies are memories. We don't want to let go. We want to serve them and believe that they are grateful to us, but they aren't. Because memories are not real. They are how we imagine things that have already happened. We want to believe that things used to be better, that we had an incredible trip that last summer of high school, that every moment was bliss, and we could have laid out by the lake for the rest of our lives. We desperately cling to that veneer, because acknowledging the truth, that life has always been this way, is more painful than we can stand to bear. Death is such an absurd concept. It has existed as long as humanity has. It is our one truth. We all must die, and we all must live with the deaths of our most beloved. We are also the only logical animal. We are uniquely gifted with the ability to separate ourselves from emotion, from instinct, and see our lives as the incalculably sudden flicker of light that they are. But still, death is the center of each and every one of our lives. And loss and regret never let us go. Thank you so much for watching. Press like, subscribe, you know the drill. I'll be back again soon. Until then, this is Halloch, signing off.